There we are. See, I give myself a fake smile to induce the real smile because it makes me laugh at myself, which is good. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the channel. My name is Margaret Pennard. I'm a historical fiction and fantasy author and an eclectic reader and a climate activist, especially this year. So welcome to the channel. And I've got a lovely Ali Shaw on the channel today as my guest for an interview. Say hi, Ali. And I know Ali because she is an editor as well as a bookstore owner. And we're going to be talking today a little bit about environmental activism, truth and reconciliation for the climate, which I'll again address a little bit more in just a second. But Ali, why don't you tell us what makes you such a unique, special person, and what's so great about Bold?
Well, thank you, Margaret, and thanks for having me. This is pretty exciting to be on your show. Unique and special person. That's a pretty high bar there. But I will say that I think that some things that I might have in common with your viewers are, for me, I'm just a normal person, seeing some major problems and knowing that I can't do everything and I can't do really huge things. What are the things that I can do that can help add up? Bold is a new coffee shop and bookstore in Portland. We just opened in October and it's in the Goose Hollow neighborhood. And our approach there is both to be uplifting the voices of underrepresented and historically excluded authors and voices and characters. And then we also make a lot of decisions on the coffee side of things too, because coffee is an industry that impacts the environment. And so we want to do that as responsibly as we can. I'm also, as Margaret said, I'm an editor, so there are environmental choices that go into that. I'm a mom, so there are environmental choices that go into that. I'm a university instructor, and so do a bit of talking with my students about trying to have environmental stewardship as well. So,
which is amazing. So within those resume of positions, you will have learned a few of the ways of connection that I'm connected to Ali. So I would just say there's a series, right? This is part of a series and we're talking about climate stuff, but also it's just a good excuse to invite fabulous people on and talk to them about their experiences and their beliefs and what's on their mind. So if you're in Portland, definitely check out Bold Coffee and Books, coffee and bookstore in my neighborhood. It's walkable. So I'm claiming it. And I met Ali and interacted with Ali very early on in my time here in Portland through indie author spaces, book fairs, networking things. Might have even been Wordstock volunteering. I don't know. There's been a long and storied history, if you will. Yes. So to have this be the latest chapter, the bookstore opening, which is one of my own dreams, is just more proof that when you are acting out your beliefs and dreams, you're putting good out into the world. So that is part of being an environmental steward, I think, putting good out in the world in any form. So so I think Ali was a little worried, and my friend Marian has stated the same, and so I'm just sort of sharing this with the audience, that the series about truth and reconciliation for the climate may come across as a little gloom and doom for folks, but my goal is that people who are restless with energy or anxious with worries or any other combination of emotions that leads them to look for community would come here and be able to feel safe enough to talk about their worries or organize with others and trust others to do any small organizing effort, right? So that's what I'm trying to make space for in my own little way for truth and reconciliation for the climate. So if you've got questions about Ali's experiences as a mom, as a small business owner, as an editor, as a any of the things that she mentioned. Um, yeah, coffee. How do you pick your coffee?
Mhm.
Put that question in the chat, and we will get to it as we go through my questions. Um, so one of the things I asked just to ground people in the guest experiences is like, did you have a moment where you were all of a sudden aware of like the climate catastrophe unfolding? Or was it something that you grew up with in terms of environmental awareness and then realized, oh, this is not going so great and we're not making any oh, okay, I need to pay. Yeah. How did that explode onto the scene for you?
Mm. Well, and I was watching your previous interview too, and I think I have a lot of common a lot in common with that person, because I think both growing up in the 80s, like we had it was fairly national curriculum, I think, to be learning about reduce, reuse, recycle, and the hole in the ozone layer, and stop using aerosols and things like that. So it was always kind of there. But I think it was always, at least in my life, it was kind of in the background. So culturally, I grew up in a small town in Idaho and up in the Rockies. And so while, in the whole, nationally and educationally and stuff, like we're seeing about the whales that were stuck under the ice. This was the time too when Julia Butterfly Hill was tree sitting. And so there was all of this kind of hubbub about, like she's trying to save, I think it was owls, right? It was
Yeah.
owl habitat. Yeah. Um, and also at the same time, there were ads on TV from ExxonMobil about how plastic saves lives and we need to drill for oil because it's what saves lives.
Yeah.
And then in our local culture, um, there was just really this kind of disconnect. There were the people were saying things like, oh, the tree huggers cost loggers their jobs and hurt their families. And the environmentalists will stop a bridge building even if one rock falls into the river. Like they're presenting it like if it's a pebble that falls into the river, they're gonna stop the whole thing. And just like the environmentalists just stop progress, and it's just because they're trying to be dramatic.
Mm,
So there's this dissonance. And also then there's like the smaller unit of my family. My parents and grandparents were loggers and hunters and fishers. And they also really taught about how ecological balance is important. And so there was always this like, um, they were not loggers anymore by the time I was born. But they definitely would talk about like when we were loggers, we would only work for the companies that also replanted trees. Like we didn't do clear cuts, we did selective cuts, and then we did replanting. That it's, you have to be mindful not to overhunt predators and prey because of the
right.
ecological imbalance that can happen. And they raised me to always spend time with trees and water. Like that's my home base. But in the Rockies, it's really easy to feel insulated from the larger climate crisis because, like, yes, it gets really cold. Yes, it gets really hot, but it always has. And yes, there are forest fires, but there have always been forest fires. Like there are ways to sort of explain it away. So it was always sort of there in the background for me. But it was really when I moved to Oregon at 17 years old and started being part of the culture here, which also has a long logging history culture.
Yeah.
But the advertisements were a bit more along the lines of the one thing campaign. If you can, if you can't do everything to save the environment, you can do one thing. Maybe it's stop using plastic grocery bags, use your reusable grocery bags. Maybe it's reducing water, buying energy saver washers and dryers, things like that. So this is kind of a long way of saying that like it took a long time, but I think, yeah, really in my 20s I started working for a publishing company, Amber Lotus, that had a really strong environmental statement. And they introduced me to Trees for the Future and the concept of tracking your carbon footprint and not just making it a neutral, not becoming carbon neutral, but becoming carbon negative.
Mm.
And I started adopting that into my business practices and in my personal practices. And then the big thing that, I mean, this is kind of, it was a big emotional moment for me where, of course, I already knew about climate crisis and everything. And I was helping an author record her audiobook. And she has a really beautiful, well, it's a very beautiful audiobook. It's Laura Messersmith-Glavin. The book is called Spirit Things. And, well, is now the good time for this?
Hold on. Let me
Okay.
put the stuff in the chat. Oh, shoot. It's not gonna. Okay. I put it in the description, thinking I could grab the link. And then when I try to grab it, it's got the ... instead of having the whole link. So
Okay.
let me write that in the whole thing here. So longtime watchers of the channel, or just people who I've talked to about the book, will know that Spirit Things is a 5-star book. I've read it. It's on my Storygraph. It's on several of the lists of like 5-star nature memoir, people I know, lists of books to buy that I have on Bookshop. But I haven't listened to the audiobook version, which came out after publication. And so I love this book. It's got lots of things going for it. But the point at which Ellie is talking about, the one passage that affected her, she queued up the passage to be able to play it for us and got permission from Laura. So if we want to play it,
Okay.
yeah, go ahead,
Yeah.
and then we'll come back.
Okay. Well, and so just real quick, the context here, if you will imagine kind of where I was sitting. So Laura's inside the recording studio and I'm in the little room on the outside of the recording studio, and I'm listening and following along with the words in the book. And my job is to catch when she does a misread, because we're humans. We always misread something once in a while, right? And so we have to catch it and reread it. And I've already built this kind of deep connection with Laura's book and her writing. It's about growing up in Alaska on a fishing boat. I had returned from living in Alaska not too long before that, and had really seen, the marine impacts of the changing water temperature and things like that already. And so I'm sitting here listening to Laura's beautiful book, and then we get to this scene, which I hadn't read yet, and it was really powerful. So we'll give it a little test here, and hopefully it'll play well.
In some places, beachcombing is more about repurposing and recycling the colossal amounts of trash that wash up on the shore, the detritus of consumer culture left for others to deal with. Every bit of garbage that goes overboard or is tossed where it can float or drift to the ocean is treated as if the ocean were infinite. It is as if humans imagine the ocean is capable of absorbing all the abuse we have to offer, its depths and breadth untouchable by human waste and mismanagement. When I was a kid, it was common for us to throw bags of garbage overboard with exactly this mindset. We would dutifully punch holes in the tops and bottoms of cans to ensure they would sink. The truly progressive among us might even snip the plastic loops that held six-packs together to prevent strangling seagulls or small seals. But once these small gestures of mindfulness had been made, the whole lot would end up in a plastic bag and go overboard. I learned early on how to make an oil slick disappear. Drizzle dish soap over the top of it to weigh it down. If the oil sinks, no one will ever know it was there. Though these waste practices have not been commonplace in Alaska for decades, the ocean continues to be used as a waste dump globally, both for trash and for emissions of every pollutant imaginable: nuclear, chemical, carbon. The Pacific Ocean now hosts 2 enormous floating rafts of plastic garbage, refuse, fishing nets, and the dumped contents of shipping containers primarily, known as the Great Pacific Garbage Patch or the Pacific Trash Vortex. In 2019, the total area of the trash vortex and its periphery spanned 1.6 million square kilometers, with the densest regions measuring twice the size of Texas and 9 feet deep. This number is expected to double over the next 10 years. These plastics do not biodegrade, but rather break down into ever smaller microplastics, which in turn can be ingested by marine life. In fact, these plastics, most of which are toxic, are already found in around 10% of the fish living in the region. In the gyre itself, the swirl of currents that bring the trash vortices together, there is 6 times more plastic than plankton, the fundamental component of the marine food chain. Similar garbage patches exist in the Atlantic and the Mediterranean as well.
Okay.
Wow.
So
if you didn't know, now you
Yeah.
know.
Guess I'll go eat Washington worms.
Ah! What is happening?
The moving truck pulls up
It's
behind
playing another audiobook. Okay. Program is
Got it?
closed. We're all got it.
Oh man. Okay. So that was Laura Messersmith-Glavin, an author who is narrating her audiobook, which Allie helped to produce as a publisher of the audiobook or producer
Just
of the
producer. Yeah. Yeah.
audiobook. And we're hearing about, I always heard the Great Pacific Garbage Gyre or something like that, but Garbage Patch. Yeah. So how you're saying that was like one of the moments that really hit you. So you're from Idaho in a landlocked area on the mountains, but you spent time in Alaska. So was it something about the ocean, which is like a later connection that like really hit, or just like a more recent experience having been from Alaska?
Well, I think what really hit is just this the massiveness of it. That it's so huge and it's deep and it's so big that nobody's really even making any effort to like do anything about it anymore. Like, well, it's just a continent of trash that is floating in the ocean, and oh, and this is happening in other seas as well. And
Yeah.
oh darn.
When were you recording that you had that a reaction or impression?
Like what year?
Yeah.
Oh, what year did
Because I think it came out like
2018?
2018, 2019?
The audiobook, was it pre-COVID?
I can look it up. Let's see.
I thought it was post-COVID, but yeah, I'm sure it was post-COVID actually.
Okay.
So maybe about 2022. It just really hit very, very much home. And there's this, it relates to that concept too of like being in the Rockies, and we're insulated from this, right? Like, oh yeah, climate change is affecting other people, but it's not really affecting us. And I'm not even really convinced that it's real. The ocean is, and this kind of perspective too, that the ocean is endless. And so yeah, maybe climate change is affecting other people, but we're fine. We can still just not worry about the trash that's floating in the ocean. And having grown up with this lifelong perspective, or at least these messages of everybody needs to do at least one thing to help the environment, and then it's like, but we'll just leave entire shipping containers worth of garbage that accumulate to be just massive. Just the deepest part is twice the size of Texas.
Yeah. You're saying that your experience was about dissonance because you had the background and then you were confronted with the facts. And I'm wondering, because when you're describing your background, you're talking about people who had like an understanding of ecological balance and would change their behavior to ensure that they were not affecting things. And so I think, yeah, in some of the discourse that I've read, there is disappointment expressed that some of the people who understand at least partially some of these, ecological tipping points in some degree, wouldn't be the first line of defense. Like, why haven't they joined forces with the people who are protecting clean water rights, or the people who are, looking to damp down wildfire risk, or things like that? So have you thought about like any of that thought work or that dissonance, and why it seems to be just, I don't know, a blanket plague sometimes?
Oh, I've thought about it a lot. I don't know that I really have any answers for it. I do think that it's kind of, well, I think it comes from this feeling of, that insulation of like, I don't personally see it affecting things. And so I don't think it's really real. And, like we can see the effect of clear cuts because it's a bald mountain that used to be beautiful, right? And so, okay, we'll go and we'll replant some trees in that area and help it get to a forest again faster. But the whole concept of the entire planet's climate is changing for the worst, and it's going to bring on catastrophe.
Yeah.
I think that people, at least the people that I grew up with, don't really embrace that truth.
What's interesting to me is that when I reflect on some of these things, it's framed in a sort of cynical way of like, people will deny, and say, well, it's not a problem, we don't have to do anything about it, until they're confronted with incontrovertible facts.
Yes.
And then it turns into, oh, well, if it's that bad, there's nothing we can do about it. And I'm like, where did that moment go where you could like do something about it? Like, they're not facing up to, I think, what they really know is the truth, because they can't handle the responsibility. And I've been in different places in my life where I feel like that responsibility is too much. I cannot open my hands for that responsibility because I will be overwhelmed. So I think it's really, I have empathy for that feeling of being in that place, but like no time for people who are still in the denial phase.
Yes,
and
yes.
That's just sort of where I am. So yeah.
And I think there's this kind of like, well, I'm not the one who dumped all the trash in the ocean. Why should I have to do something about it? And it's like, well, but we're not asking you to hire a barge and like go out there and pick it with your own fingers. But like, can you be an activist? Can you help vote in a way that's going to support funding to do something about this?
Right. Can you consider how your individual actions either model for others or add to the problem? You can pick one side if you think about it. And what you just said, like, I'm not the one who, is also a similar argument to people who talk about reparations and people who talk about racism and like the legacies of historically marginalizing communities, Black communities and communities of color. And it's like, I'm not the one who owned slaves. And you're like, well, can we deconstruct that? Are you still living with the privileges that came from an unequal society 200 years ago? Yes. Right. Okay, well then can you consider how your choices might undo some of that damage? And like, that's what I hear some of, and it's very encouraging. But I want that to be more of what we're focusing on, So yeah. Hi, Cat Paw. Cat Paw says it irks me that the media calls it garbage patch as if it was the size of a kitchen garden. Yeah. It's huge. It's hard to envision. What did I came across something where someone said there are types of problems that are so complex, and I'm forgetting the name of it again. I wrote it down for a live stream like a month or so ago. It's something that's so complex we can't wrap our mind around it. The internet is one of those things, and climate change is one of those things. So it's hard to inspire action when we can't like understand the vastness of the problem, kind of like space and all that stuff, which I think is important. But yeah, admitting it and then trying to get it is important. Jem, hello. Leslie, hello. Okay. So, I started this series about truth and reconciliation because I had like a realization moment that, we're cooked, to say it nicely. And then an aftermath of like, what can I do? What is my one action kind of thing, right?
Mhm.
Was there a period where you were like digesting, grieving in some way, and then like bouncing back? Is there some way? Did that dovetail with the bookstore opening, or is that not really how it processed for you?
That's a really good question. All your watchers already know your one moment of recognizing that we're cooked. Is that
No,
true?
I mean, I can explain it
Can
a
you
bit
share?
more.
I want to hear.
No, so I before last November, obviously, I was definitely in a mindset of like, okay, a lot of individual actions are needed, but also like a lot of pressure on corporations are still needed. There's all this activism, there's all this like energy behind Kamala Harris and what we could do if we keep the pressure on. And then the election happened, and I was like, wow, really disappointed by fellow Americans. Wow, the next administration is going to make none of that progress, and we're going to go backwards. And that is exactly what has happened in the last 6 months. And so I had sort of a depression for a while. I don't know. I don't remember things very well anymore. It just sort of, it's not the current state, so it's no longer true. But maybe months where I was digesting this, and like just sort of in my cave. Then came back and I was like, well, what can I still do? Like, how do I help other people survive this emotional shitstorm as well? And so that's what I decided to do the series for, is like, we're still here, we're still mad, we're still trying to do something, we're still trying to carve out little pockets where we might survive if we change our behaviors and cultivate the skills to survive a different kind of world. So, apocalypse. That's
Apocalypse.
my moment. So yeah,
Mhm.
how about you?
Um, yeah, especially since 2020, like my memory is total brain fog. But I think it's probably been maybe more just keeping with the same path, but amping it up some more. And so like I don't know, like, yes, there's still a depression period, but also probably, honestly, me being very human, I'm probably still in a little bit of denial too. Cause like I'm doing as much as I can. And like if I think about like no matter how much I do, it's just not gonna work. Yeah, that's just gonna cause a breakdown and I don't have time for that.
Yeah.
So but definitely trying to put it into every aspect of my life as much as possible. And so, the ways that we use transportation, the ways that we shop, the ways that we, the businesses that we support, where we send our money, and their business practices and environmental practices. And so, yeah, I definitely went away, like not away. I still use really reusable grocery bags, and I still, reduce water and recycle and all those things. But just trying to amp it up and put it into every place that I can, and very much in business practices. That's huge for me. Um,
So
and
when
that's
you're
something, go ahead.
Yeah, when you're talking about, where you choose to send your dollars, like, that is one of the biggest things, is economic boycotts in America, because it's
Mhm.
not, sacrificing as much as some other choices might be, and it's, trying to speak in the language which our governmental system understands, which is money. So, the thing is, I'm reading this book, I don't know if you've seen this before, it's We Refuse for Agitation August by,
Uh-huh.
Kelly Carter Jackson, and I've just finished the introduction, and there's 5 different ways she's gonna discuss the way that Black, Americans have refused to cooperate with a system that doesn't treat them as humans, and it's so good. But one of them she describes is force, and force can be economic. And I thought, oh man, I'm really liking how she's framing these things, and
Mhm.
talking about nonviolence and violence and the violence that was done and all this kind of stuff. So really getting into that. And I did just want to say, Bold Coffee and Books is one of the places where the book gift cards will go to if you are participating in Agitation August. So if you don't know, Agitation August is a intensive interview series in August this year where I'm interviewing folks almost every weekday in the month. And we're going to talk about books that shook them up. And one of my lovely guests chose We Refuse. So I have been and will be reading books from all these people's choices so that I can discuss with them and go a little deeper about the agitation that we need right now. So that's been a really happy, positive project for me. So I'm glad Bold is going to be one of the prizes. The prizes are for playing bingo, and you play bingo by checking off the words that you hear people say in their interviews. So if you're curious about that, I've got a link here explaining the it's not a readathon. It's a event, I guess, a book event on Booktube. And then if you check out the community post, that's where I've posted the bingo cards, and you can pick one of the 3 colorful things up there, check off your words as we go. So that's pretty fun.
Awesome.
You're also talking about business owner choices. And I think that's one of the ways we can feel less overwhelmed and more in control is by making positive choices and telling other people about them. So what are some of the ways that like daily you see opportunities to affect either the discourse or like the physical reality of our climate impacts?
Yeah. Well, first, real quick, I want to say I would love to have a poster of Agitation August in
Oh, for
bold
the
to put on
board?
the.
Yeah, that's a great
Yeah.
idea.
People need to know about this.
Yeah. Okay, I'll figure out how to print that out. That would be a great idea. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. Okay. So business practices, everything. I mean, there are large choices, and then there are the small everyday choices. And so, you mentioned everyday. So like the everyday choices, when we do book orders, it's tempting sometimes to get on and look at like, okay, what books sold yesterday? What books am I, and just put in an order every day. But we really limit ourselves and do large orders at a time in order to keep them in one box and fewer shipments.
Purchases,
And what's that?
bulk purchases, just like when we go to the grocery store. Yeah, love it. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And then also ordering from physical stores so that all of the purchases, all of the stock has been delivered in one truck all at once to that store. And so I can just pick it up from the store instead of there being all of these repeated things. And if I'm ordering from Webstaurant store, say, then that's going to get shipped from the East Coast, and it's going to be like 3 items in a box versus if I go to Chef's store, which is corporate, so I don't love that, but we do
James. So this is like a wholesaling
yeah
fulfillment thing in between.
yeah because we have to buy in large quantities. We need to make sure that we can buy at wholesale in order to have room for a profit margin with retail. But making those choices of I'm going to shop in person at a store that has already received all of the stock in one big truck shipment versus trying to get things shipped to me individually, even though that would be more convenient. I'm going to go ahead and make the choice to spend my time doing that.
Yes. I make that choice as well because I think I don't want to instigate more demand for something that's not necessary, right? If it's already sitting somewhere a couple miles away, why don't I get it there instead of instigating someone else to be at my whim and call like I'm a little sultan, So I just envision those choices enabling the people who do need the delivery, like
Yeah.
I was talking with someone recently about straws, and I think it was metal straws or something like that. And it was, I think it was on Booktube, and I think Maggie had something to say about it. But the idea is that like as much as I can not use straws and cut down on them, that will leave more leeway for the people who do need them because they've got issues with swallowing or issues with, cold liquids or whatever it is, but need to drink liquids. And so, I love that. I love that. So
Yeah, for sure. That brings up a good point that like some people do need home delivery and online shopping and all of that. And I want them to have that accessibility.
Right.
And because they're going to need, the emissions that go into creating that, I can offset that by making the choices to not use those. On a larger scale, and I think this is something that, if for those of us who are coffee and tea drinkers, most in the Pacific Northwest, we're not really growing coffee beans or tea leaves. So these are things that come from other places. Okay, what are you going to school
I
me
do
on?
have a friend who has cultivated a Camellia sinensis bush outside their door. So
that's amazing.
yes, large scale for sure.
Lemon balm grows prolifically here. There are things.
True.
There's mint. Yes, there are things. And also a lot of tea comes from other places and obviously coffee beans do too. And so in opening this coffee shop, what's that?
And chocolate.
Let's take a moment for the chocolate.
Except for cat paw. Still like chocolate. But yeah, for most of us,
Yeah. So there are these things that, yes, we could survive without, and many of us are making choices to indulge in them anyway. And so, we opened a coffee shop, we opened a business that is based on this. And so trying to go like, okay, well, how can we offset it though? We work with the Great North is our roaster. And the reason that we chose them is because, there are a couple of reasons, but a main one is that they source all of their coffee beans from Central and South America rather than from Africa and Indonesia because it is fewer emissions to ship the beans from the same part of the world, right? Not have to go across the oceans. And they find farming families that they choose to support and have these long-term relationships with, and they pay higher than market value to those farmers in order to ensure that they are receiving sustainable income. Whereas many other coffee shops and coffee roasters, there's just like market value is this very low level that keeps the farmers essentially in poverty. And so they're making these conscious decisions for the environment and for the people involved in order to try to be socially responsible. And that aligns with our values. So
yeah. Yes, that's good to hear. And also it's quite a task to begin to tackle this because you have to question every one of your consumer relationships. But once you start to have like trusted, okay, equal exchange, or okay, this local business, and you sort of have the understanding that they're trying to do the best they can. So they're making decisions that are, not 100% on everything because then they couldn't afford to be in business, but the best they can at this time. So yeah, that's important.
Yeah.
I had some other questions. One of them is about a generational divide. So I'm 44. I don't know. I think we're like within the same few years, right?
Yeah. So, in like a week and a half, I'll be 44. So
happy birthday. Yeah. So when we've grown up, we've had a certain set of expectations. And I think when we're confronting the structures of power, we're often interacting with people from a different generation with different expectations or different understandings of the world, and they're not budging. So when I'm talking about climate catastrophe and like what could be done and how our mindsets need to change, do you think the generational divide is like one of the most serious things that we need to conquer, or is it more an ideological divide and political things that unfortunately have gone on to future generations.
Mhm.
You know, like, and how might we have encountered these? Like, have you run into either of these divides, or how have they manifested?
Oh, I've definitely run into these divides. And I it's such a challenging thing because when you're talking with somebody who is really deep set in their belief that is the opposite of what your belief is, um and you're right, gosh darn it, because you've read all the facts, you know. Those are really difficult conversations. And it is really easy to kind of step into that place of like, okay, well, I want to conquer this. I want to sway you, and I'm going to win this argument, you know? Um, and I think that sometimes what that does is it actually widens the divide, which makes it really, really extra challenging. So I don't know. I try to continue the conversations, and I try to be bringing in um information from sources that I know that they trust, if it's people I know already. Um and yeah, so I think like one of the things that's actually National Geographic has been a really useful resource that I found for talking to people who are more on the conservative end of the spectrum, because it does tend to be a resource that they trust. And then when they, see the journalism that goes into that, they kind of go, oh, yeah, no, I didn't know about this, and this. That's really interesting to think about it that way, and to now I have more information. Um,
Yeah, it's harder and harder to find institutions that are trusted by both sides, that
yeah,
aren't being gutted. So yeah, National Geographic is a great one.
yeah, definitely. Um, there's a book called I Never Thought of It That Way, and it's about having these difficult conversations, and trying to excuse me while I stutter, but assist people on wherever they are on the spectrum, and being able to talk to each other about their ideologies. And yes, there's a generational divide, but I'm not so sure that that is kind of the focus, because if you have a baby boomer who is maybe raising their grandkids are going to have that same perspective too. Or maybe their Gen X kids held the same, keep the same perspective as their baby boomer parents, and then they're raising their kids that way too. So maybe some cultural things more than necessarily generational.
I just finished this book. I don't know if you've heard much about Martha Beck, but it's another Agitation August book. So I have all the tabs on it. And she talks about negotiating really difficult interpersonal relationships in a similar way to like having these difficult conversations.
Mhm,
And it's like a technique that she describes that is like, here's what I observe in a very,
mhm,
neutral and a very, kind sort of fact-based way. Here's what I
mhm,
observe. Here's the evidence. Tell me where I'm wrong. And that's her like key phrase of like, if you come at it with calm energy, if you say what you've observed and what you believe to be true in a non-threatening way, that I think allows people to digest it and actually hear it, and then
mhm, mhm,
add what they're feeling or experiencing, and then you have a much different conversation than I'm wrong, you're right, etc.
mhm,
Um, and I just thought that was really good, but it also can come into play with not just like relationships that are personal, but also trying to persuade people in
mhm,
a not, what's the word for proselytizing way, but in a
mhm.
open discussion way, which is what you're describing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I will say too, like I'm not necessarily an expert on this. I definitely try my best, as I think most people do. And I also am emotional and reactive sometimes. And sometimes I'm just,
Yeah.
I just don't have the bandwidth for this conversation right now sometimes. Like I'm working a lot of jobs and raising what feels like a lot of kids, like sometimes I just don't have the bandwidth. And so, I want to create some space there just for the humanness of it too, because this is hard work and it takes a lot of commitment and emotional bandwidth, and we don't always have it.
Right. One of the things I think that separates the camps is like we each have fears, but our fears lead us to different choices. And I feel like the choice that we commit to is what is differentiating us in many respects. So validating the fear and saying, yes, this is completely rational. Think about the choice again, like consider new information, sit with it. Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things you're talking about was pertinent. So I put this into the chat, which is a group that you started. So I started this idea, this like Booktube community, discuss the issues to sort of help us feel better about what's happening. But you've got a really cool group that you're hosting at Bold that is called Meet Me at the Crossroads. And through that, which I've attended a couple times, I learned, what you're talking about. Sometimes I don't have the emotional bandwidth, but I heard Tim saying how he was able to like present information in a critical time and, maybe start those gears turning for someone to make a different choice. And I was like, wow, that's so impressive. Can you tell us a little bit about that group, who's congregated, how it's sort of rolling out, what you think about it? And that's the link.
Yeah, definitely. And so I do have to give credit to Colleen and Zachariah are the people who created the group, and they reached out to Bold as like, can you host it? Can we have our meeting there? And so like, yes, absolutely. This certainly fits exactly with our ideals here. And they are from the National Writers Union. It is not necessarily a National Writers Union event, but it is like, that's kind of where the core group ended up starting. And then it has grown to the Bold group too. So we meet on a quarterly basis. The next one, what was the date that I said? It's in the link. I believe it's September 26th. At 7:00 and p.m. And so we meet and talk about like the latest political issues, and it's both some emotional processing of how is this hitting us, and then it is also some, hey, these are some action items that I heard about, these are the things that I'm doing that you all are welcome to join me with, and so on. And so the group has been anywhere from 8 to 35 at the various meetings. The fall and winter ones usually tend to be a little bit bigger. But definitely like so we've heard about like the caravans that happen on third Sundays in East Portland, so that they're like rallies and protests as well, but they're in cars, and the idea is to be more inclusive to folks who maybe can't march for physical reasons, or maybe for safety reasons, if they are concerned about perhaps ICE showing up to a rally or something like that, they can stay inside their cars for another layer of security and things. So it's really an incredible group, and there are so many resources. In the last one, Zachariah was telling us a lot about the differences between different kinds of warrants and the ones that, so for Bold being a physical space, there are certain warrants that we can say, like we as the business do not allow you to come in here with that kind of a warrant. There are other kinds of warrants where we can't do that. So it's good to know where we can make that stand legally.
Right. Have rights.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great group. So yeah, fellow local author Jeff Stuckey was there, and he was telling us about the car caravans and the signs that the people were holding. And then, like, a few days later, I was on Broadway, and I saw people holding up signs, sitting in wheelchairs, and I was like, "See, there's the process. There's, like, the word and people joining," and it was great. It was really neat to see.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a great group, and I encourage anyone who's curious to just check out the event link. And, you know, if you wanna talk to me or Allie, or if you're in Portland and you wanna come to the next one, September 26th, 7 PM.
Yes.
But it's an example of someone who is feeling alone or isolated, reaching out and trying to connect. And I think that is a fear that is being turned into a choice that is positive. So that is what I love to see. So I wanted to highlight that, and I'm thankful that Allie hosts them. They're great.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Can I touch on something? So you're talking about like this basis of fear being behind some of the choices that people make in the ways that they see the world. And when I say they, I should say we, because it's really, it's a human thing.
Yeah.
And I think that it's really important to point out too, that like, so when people are in poverty or in survival mode, which may be because of poverty, or it may be because of some other threat, because of war, or because of being, you know, fearful of ICE coming, or some other reason, being a member of a marginalized community. When you are in survival mode, you can't, like, your focus is on surviving. And so it makes the idea of thinking about climate change a luxury, because everything is about in the moment, in the here and now. And I think that that is really relevant, both in the conversations that we're having, but also, and the fear mongering that can happen from the other side, because people now have this fear that, well, it's undocumented immigrants that are the reason that we have a subpar healthcare system, or the reason that our education system is so bad. And it's like, no, it's not, you know, but that's what they're being fed. And it is creating fear, which puts them in a place of not being able to think about the other issues. And so I think that a big part of advocating for climate change is also advocating for food security, financial security, for reparations, for safety for immigrants, for women's health care, and all of these kinds of things as well. Because when everybody is in a place of security and safety, then we can all work together for the bigger issues too.
Right. And I think even if it's not 100% perfect, ideal, this network that we have, everyone working on the same page, you have little pockets who can do this, which creates a little bit more space. You have little pockets who can do this, which creates a little bit more space. And that's what I am hoping for, because I do not have a vision or like the lifespan to be able to see where like we're healing from this yet. So I'm just thinking, what can we do to create a little space, to create a little bit more opportunity, a little bit more equality? Yeah. I think that was the Allie's comment. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know we're getting close to the hour mark, and I don't want to keep you forever. We've got a couple of different questions. So I know that you prepared a little in advance. Was there one that we haven't touched on yet that you wanted particularly to highlight, either about trusting sources, or you know, what gives you hope, which movements are sort of giving you hope with their methods or tactics or things that seem worth adopting?
Oh gosh.
Anything else you want to throw out there?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's funny that you use those words though. What methods and movements give me hope? Because I think at the last Meet Me at the Crossroads meeting, my self-introduction was I don't have hope. But that's not always the case. I do, when I see younger generations making movements and taking political stands that that really sway things. You know, there's a book called The 21, and that one's about gun control, but you know, just in general, people from the younger generations taking a stand, you know, that gives me a lot of hope. The seeing lots of activism these days, it gives me hope, and it also gives me distress because they're, you know, despite all the activism, things are still a runaway train. But, you know, like hearing you talk and all of the books that you introduced me to and the other forms of media and the people that you're following, that you introduced me to, that gives me hope. That's always uplifting for me. So thank you for the work that you do.
Good. Thank you. Yeah, I vacillate between like a very short term goal or thinking and a very long term. And when I hear you say like the people who are getting out and becoming activists and shouting and, you know, shouting into the void sometimes, but I feel, or I choose to feel like the beginning of the magic, you know, like that feeling that like we can do this, we can come together. I've never been part of a huge movement that like got anything crucial done. So I don't have that experience to fall back on. But when I study history and when I read about others' accounts of things, I think like there must have been, you know, that feeling of something building up and people feeling like they can count on each other and then a tipping point and change. And so I feel like it's kind of a choice because it's kind of a faith, you know, and I don't have much experience with that either, but I'm hoping to make it come true. So that's hopefully what we get out of coming together and creating this community and talking about it.
Yeah, definitely. You know, another thing that gives me hope too is not just the younger generations, but we have, there's been this really cool thing that I've seen happening, where whenever there's a big protester rally in Portland, like the No Kings March and stuff,
Yeah.
Some people will come in to Bold after the protest as their little, like, I'm going to treat myself now because of the work that I did. So, yes. Come in and get your cookies.
Yes.
And a lot of them are the older generations though. And they're like, I protested Vietnam. I protested, you know, all of these things before. I did sit-ins and I protested clear cuts, all of these kinds of things. And they're still out there today. And they are there and experienced and willing to help pass on their knowledge from their experience to us and the younger generations too. And they've been fighting for a long time. And that gives me, it gives me hope because some of those things did make change.
Right. Yeah. One of the things that I took away from and I've been sitting with from when I hosted Susan Palumbo was the reading that I did for that interview, and her book, Countess, had a lot to do with like you can't disentangle colonization and like imperialism, the project of capitalism, from climate change. Like it's created by that mindset of like conquer and extract and dehumanize. And so like thinking about that and sitting with that and thinking like, okay, what did I grow up with? I grew up with like the nuclear family, the very foreshortened responsibility, you know, like, yes, we can be idealist, we can work for change, but like your responsibility is this small thing. And the more I get exposed to these bigger books of like different traditions and, you know, previous societies and like bigger dreams, I feel like, can we learn from that? Can we like sit at the feet of our elders? Can we process plants that have souls? Like all these other ways of thinking that come off a little loopy, a little weird. Like I'm good with that. I'm good with that.
Yeah. Books are amazing. Books give us so much empathy. And, you know, even when we don't have access to people from certain cultures that are different than ours, the books give us a window into that.
Yeah.
And the more books we read, the more we have, and the more that we can broaden our view of the world and other people and the things that we can do all together.
I didn't send you this as a question, so you may not have one right on the spot. But do
Okay.
you have a book that is like really like Robin Wall Kimmerer is sort of like the, you know, the one I think of right away in terms of like the envisioning a new future and a different system. Do you have
Mhm.
anything that like really turned that light on for you? That's a great recommendation. Bookseller recommendation time.
Well, because I'm on the spot, I'm gonna pick the low-hanging fruit. But yeah, that book that I Want a Better Catastrophe by Andrew Boyd that you bought at the shop too. So background here, I didn't know about this book. Yes. Oh, look at all those flags. I love
Oh yeah.
that.
Oh yeah.
So for when we were doing our Kickstarter for Bold, one of our reward tiers was that somebody could choose thank you for coming, those of you who have to head out. Somebody could choose a book that we would always keep in stock. And of course there were guidelines there. But this is one where I was like, no, this absolutely fits with our mission and our method and everything. And I hadn't known about it, but this person who chose that reward tier selected it. And so we will always have that book in stock for until it goes out of print. Hopefully that doesn't happen. And it's, this concept of the catastrophe is coming, but how can we at least make it a better catastrophe?
Yes. Yes. That's a good one. That's a good one. Okay. And I'm just writing myself a note to put a card on this video with that book review, because I actually did a standalone book review, which I don't do for many, but that one was like, I need to do a just video for this book.
Awesome.
This is so good. Yeah. Excellent, excellent recommendation. I second that. And yeah, so this has been really unearthing and excellent. So thank you for coming, Allie. I know you're getting a lot of ribbing by people in your environment about coming on YouTube, but you know, how else are we going to get the word out to more people?
Yeah.
So
well, and yeah, I think the ribbing is because I think what I was telling you, like I was so hesitant because I'm not an expert. I'm not an environmentalist. I'm just a human trying to make choices that hopefully will combine with other people's choices and can make a difference. And you really helped ease my mind about that, you know, we're in a room, in a virtual room with other humans trying to do the same thing. So
yeah. Exactly. So I appreciate that too. So thank you, anyone who's been here in the live chat. If you are watching this on the replay, thank you as well. Thank you for sharing this time with us. If you've got questions for Allie, you can drop them down below and I'll take them and walk down to Bold Coffee and Books and see if she has an answer. Otherwise, you can walk yourself down to the Coffee Bookstore, which is lovely over in the Goose Hollow neighborhood of Portland. But otherwise, you know, make those choices that will help reinforce community or start community where you can. That is what I would love to see happen and love to hear about. If you want to come back and tell us what your one tiny step is, that'd be lovely.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for everybody who came.
Yeah. So thanks, everyone. Take care, happy reading, and diversify that reading list. Bye.